Elowen Moonwhisper stood atop the highest spire of the Silver Palace, her violet eyes scanning the lush canopy of Sylvanor. The Elven kingdom stretched as far as she could see, an ocean of emerald leaves swaying in the warm summer breeze. But beneath the peaceful facade, a storm was brewing. A distant roar shattered the tranquility, followed by the faint screams of her people. Elowen's delicate fingers tightened around the railing, her knuckles turning white. Another village under attack, another failure to protect her subjects. "Your Highness," a deep voice called from behind. "The Verdant Council awaits." Elowen turned to face Thaler, captain of the Thorn Guard. His weathered face bore the scars of countless battles, a stark contrast to her own unblemished features. "Tell me, old friend," she said softly, "how many this time?" Thaler's eyes darkened. "A pride of manticores, Your Highness. They've already decimated 2 settlements on the eastern border." Elowen's heart sank. Manticores were among the most vicious of the magical beasts that had once been confined to the wild lands. Now they roamed freely, leaving destruction in their wake. "We should have never trusted the Circle of the Oak with such power," Thaler growled. "Their arrogance has doomed us all." Elowen shook her head. "The druids have maintained the balance for millennia, Thaler. We cannot blame them for forces beyond their control." As they descended the spiraling staircase, Elowen's mind raced. In 3 days, she would face the trials of ascension to prove her worthiness for the crown. How could she rule a kingdom besieged by creatures she couldn't control? The doors to the council chamber swung open, revealing a circular room bathed in soft, golden light. 7 elders sat around a table crafted from a single piece of ancient oak, their faces etched with worry. Princess Elowen, Lysandra, the eldest of the Verdant Council, spoke first. "We face dire times. The magical beasts grow bolder with each passing day. Our people cry out for protection, for leadership." Elowen took her seat, feeling the weight of their expectations. "I am aware of the gravity of our situation, honored councillors. What solutions do you propose?" A heated debate erupted. Some argued for an all-out war against the beasts, others for retreating deeper into the heart of the forest. Elowen listened, her heart growing heavier with each impractical suggestion. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. A young elf stumbled in, his clothes torn and bloodied. "Forgive the intrusion," he gasped, "but the manticores, they're approaching the city." Chaos ensued. The councillors rose, shouting orders and demands. But Elowen remained seated, a strange calm washing over her. In that moment of crisis, she felt something stir within her, an ancient power awakening. Without a word, she stood and strode past the bewildered council members. Thaler fell into step beside her, hand on his sword. "Your Highness, where are you going?" Elowen's eyes gleamed with determination. "To face the manticores." "That's madness," Thaler protested. "You'll be torn to shreds." But Elowen pressed on, her steps unwavering. As she emerged from the palace, the sounds of battle grew louder. In the distance, she could see the manticore's massive forms, their lion bodies topped with human-like heads and deadly scorpion tails. Taking a deep breath, Elowen raised her hands. The stirring in her chest exploded into a surge of energy that coursed through her body. As the first manticore charged toward her, she let out a melodious cry that resonated with power. The beast skidded to a halt, its eyes locked on Elowen. The princess felt a connection form, a bridge between her mind and the creature's wild essence. With growing confidence, she projected thoughts of peace and harmony. To the astonishment of all who witnessed it, the manticore bowed its head in submission. A hush fell over the battlefield as elves and beasts alike stared in disbelief. Elowen stood tall, her silver hair shimmering in the fading sunlight, one hand resting gently on the manticore's mane. The creature purred contentedly, all traces of aggression gone from its eyes. Thaler was the first to break the silence. "By the ancient trees," he whispered, "it's true. The legends of the Beast Tamers, they're real." Elowen turned to face her people, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Relief at averting disaster warred with confusion over her newfound abilities. But there was no time to dwell on it. The remaining manticores circled warily, unsure whether to attack or retreat. Drawing on her newly awakened power, Elowen reached out to the beasts with her mind. Images of peaceful coexistence flowed from her consciousness to theirs. One by one, the manticores relaxed their stances, some even approaching to nuzzle against her outstretched hands. As the immediate danger passed, murmurs of awe rippled through the gathered elves. Lysandra pushed her way to the front, her eyes wide with wonder. "Princess Elowen," she said, her voice trembling, "you have manifested a gift not seen in our realm for 1,000 years. This changes everything." But not all faces showed admiration. From the shadows of a nearby alleyway, a hooded figure watched the scene unfold with barely concealed fury. The elf's hand clenched around a dark crystal hanging from his neck, which pulsed with an ominous energy. Oblivious to the hidden observer, Elowen addressed her people. "Friends, we have lived in fear for too long. These creatures are not our enemies, but victims of a greater imbalance. I vow to you, I will restore harmony to our land." Cheers erupted from the crowd, but Elowen's keen ears caught whispers of doubt. "Pretty words," one elf muttered, "but can she tame them all? What of the dragons in the north or the krakens in the western seas?" Elowen's heart sank. Her people were right to be skeptical. Taming a few manticores was a far cry from securing the entire kingdom. She needed answers, and there was only one place to find them. "Thaler," she called, "prepare a small expedition. We ride for the Grove of Whispers at dawn." The captain nodded, but concern creased his brow. "The home of the Circle of the Oak? Your Highness, they haven't welcomed visitors in decades, not since they lost control of the beasts they were sworn to protect," Elowen finished. "I know, but they're the only ones who might understand what's happening to me, and why the creatures have gone wild." As preparations began for the journey, Elowen retreated to her chambers. She stood before an ancient mirror, studying her reflection. The face that looked back seemed different somehow, marked by the weight of her new responsibility. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Lysandra glided into the room, her ageless face solemn. "I apologize for the intrusion, Your Highness, but there's something you must know before you depart." Elowen gestured for her to continue. "The gift you possess," Lysandra said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's not just a matter of communing with beasts. It's a sign that you are destined to be more than just a queen of elves. You could become a ruler of all living things in Sylvanor." Elowen's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Lysandra's eyes gleamed with a mixture of hope and fear. "There are those who will see your power as a threat. Be wary, young one. Not all dangers in our realm have claws and fangs." As the elder counselor departed, leaving Elowen alone with her swirling thoughts, a chill ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that her journey to the Grove of Whispers would set in motion events that would change Sylvanor forever. Dawn broke over Sylvanor, painting the forest canopy in hues of gold and amber. Elowen stood at the city gates, surrounded by a small contingent of Thornguard warriors. Thaler approached, leading her mount a magnificent elk with gleaming silver antlers. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "we're ready to depart." Elowen nodded, her eyes scanning the gathered group. "A smaller party than I expected, Captain." Thaler's expression darkened. "Many were. Hesitant to venture so close to the wild lands, my lady, even with your newfound abilities." A pang of disappointment shot through Elowen's heart, but she pushed it aside. Fear was a powerful force, one she'd have to overcome if she hoped to unite her people. As they set out, Elowen couldn't help but marvel at the changed atmosphere around her. Birds that normally scattered at their approach now swooped closer, chirping melodiously. Small woodland creatures peered curiously from the underbrush, drawn by her presence. Their journey took them deeper into the heart of the forest, where ancient trees towered like silent sentinels. The air grew thick with magic, tingling against Elowen's skin. By midday, they reached a fog-shrouded ravine that marked the border of the druid's domain. "The Grove of Whispers lies beyond," Thaler said, his voice hushed. "None have crossed this boundary in living memory." Elowen dismounted, approaching the edge of the mist. As she reached out, the fog seemed to recoil from her touch, revealing a narrow stone bridge. I must go alone from here, she announced, turning to face her stunned companions. But Your Highness, Thaler protested, it's too dangerous. We can't protect you if... Elowen raised a hand, silencing him. This is a journey I must make on my own, old friend. Trust in me as I trust in you to keep our people safe in my absence. With a heavy heart, Thaler bowed. As you command, my queen. Elowen stepped onto the bridge, feeling the ancient stone vibrate beneath her feet. As she crossed, the mist closed in behind her, cutting off all sight and sound of her escort. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she pressed on, guided by an inexplicable pull. The fog thinned, revealing a clearing bathed in ethereal light. At its center stood an enormous oak tree, its trunk easily the width of a house. Gnarled roots broke the surface like great serpents, and its branches seemed to scrape the very sky. As Elowen approached, a figure materialized from within the tree itself. An ancient elf, his skin as weathered as bark, regarded her with eyes that swirled with galaxies. "Welcome, Elowen Moonwhisper," he intoned, his voice like rustling leaves. "I am Aldred, last of the great druids. We have awaited your coming." Elowen bowed her head respectfully. "You honor me, great druid. I seek answers about the power that has awakened within me and the chaos that plagues our land." Aldred's expression grew somber. "Your gift and our plight are intertwined, young one. Come, there is much you must see." He led her to a pool at the base of the great oak. As Elowen gazed into its still waters, visions bloomed before her eyes. She saw the history of Sylvanor unfold, the ancient pact between elves and magical beasts, the rise of the druids as mediators, and the gradual fading of that connection over millennia. "We grew complacent," Aldred explained, his voice heavy with regret. "Our order dwindled, and with it, our ability to maintain the balance. But nature abhors a vacuum, and so a new power has risen to fill the void." The pool's surface rippled, revealing a hooded figure surrounded by writhing shadows. In his hand, he clutched a dark crystal that pulsed with malevolent energy. Malach, Aldred spat the name like a curse. Once a promising druid, now corrupted by his lust for power. He seeks to bind the magical beasts to his will, to use them as weapons against the elven realm. Elowen's fists clenched at her sides. "How do I stop him?" Aldred turned to her, his otherworldly eyes piercing her very soul. "You must embrace your destiny, Elowen. The power of the Beast Tamers flows through your veins, stronger than it has in generations. But to fully awaken it, you must face trials that will test your very essence." As if in response to his words, a deafening roar shook the grove. Elowen spun to see a massive shape descending from the sky, a dragon, its scales gleaming like polished obsidian. "Your first test approaches," Aldred said calmly, even as the ground trembled beneath the dragon's landing. "Remember, young queen, true mastery comes not from domination, but from understanding." With that, the ancient druid vanished, leaving Elowen alone to face the greatest challenge of her life. As the dragon's burning gaze fixed upon her, she took a deep breath, reaching for the power that now coursed through her veins. The fate of Sylvanor hung in the balance, and Elowen knew that her next actions would shape the destiny of her people for generations to come. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, its massive form blocking out the sky. Scales black as night rippled over powerful muscles, and eyes like molten gold fixed upon Elowen with predatory intensity. Steam curled from its nostrils as it lowered its head, bringing razor-sharp teeth as long as swords within feet of the elven princess. Elowen's heart raced, but she stood her ground. Aldred's words echoed in her mind, understanding, not domination. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her newfound senses to touch the dragon's consciousness. A maelstrom of emotions assaulted her: anger, fear, confusion, and beneath it all, a deep, aching loneliness. Images flashed through her mind. The dragon's long life, centuries of solitude broken only by conflict with those who sought to control or destroy it. "I see you," Elowen whispered, opening her eyes to meet the dragon's gaze. "I understand your pain." The dragon reared back, surprise evident in its posture. A low rumble emanated from its chest, not quite a roar, but a sound filled with question and wary curiosity. Slowly, Elowen raised her hand, palm outward. I am Elowen of House Moonwhisper, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I come not as an enemy or a master, but as a friend. Will you share your name with me? For a long moment the dragon remained motionless. Then, to Elowen's astonishment, it spoke. Its voice was like thunder given form, reverberating through her very bones. I am Noctis, the dragon rumbled. Why do you not flee or fight, little elf? Why do you seek to know me? Elowen took a step forward, her hand still extended. Because I believe there can be peace between our kinds, Noctis. The old ways have been forgotten, but they can be restored. Will you help me? Noctis lowered his head once more, this time bringing one enormous eye level with Elowen. She could see herself reflected in that golden orb, looking small and fragile against the dragon's might. You are either very brave or very foolish, Noctis said, but I sense truth in your words. What would you ask of me? Relief flooded through Elowen, but she knew this was only the beginning. Tell me, great Noctis, what has driven you and your kin to such fury against my people? What has disturbed the ancient balance? The dragon's eye narrowed. It began with whispers on the wind, dark promises of power and freedom. Many of my brethren succumbed, their minds clouded by an insidious force. I resisted, but found myself alone, caught between two worlds at war. Elowen's mind raced. This aligned with what Aldred had told her about Malach. This force, she pressed. Can you describe it? Noctis raised his head, looking to the horizon. It feels like chains upon the soul, little elf, a compulsion that twists natural instincts into destructive rage. I have seen its source a crystal as black as the void, wielded by a cloaked figure who reeks of corrupted magic. Malach, Elowen breathed. She looked up at Noctis, determination blazing in her eyes. Will you stand with me against this threat? Together we could free your kin and restore peace to Sylvanor. The dragon regarded her for a long moment, smoke curling from his nostrils as he considered. You ask much, Elowen of House Moonwhisper. To align myself with elves after centuries of conflict, it goes against all I have known. Elowen's heart sank, but Noctis wasn't finished. And yet, he continued, I sense a power in you unlike any I have encountered. Perhaps it is time for change. With a grace that belied his enormous size, Noctis lowered his body to the ground. Come, little queen, he said. Let us see if your actions match your words. There is much to be done if we are to challenge this Malach and free my enslaved kin. Elowen approached, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on Noctis's scales. They were warm to the touch, smooth yet unyielding. As she climbed onto his back, settling between two enormous spines, a sense of awe washed over her. Where to first? Noctis asked, his body tensing in preparation for flight. Elowen thought of Thaler and her escort, waiting at the edge of the mist. Of her people in Sylvanor, living in fear of the very creatures she now sought to understand. Of Malach lurking in the shadows with his dark crystal. To the heart of the wild lands, she declared, it's time to gather allies and face this threat head-on. With a powerful thrust of his wings, Noctis launched into the sky. As they soared above the treetops, Elowen felt a surge of hope. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since the crisis began, she believed that peace might truly be possible. Little did she know that even as she and Noctis flew towards destiny, dark forces were gathering strength, preparing to challenge the young queen's newfound power in ways she could scarcely imagine. As Noctis soared over the vast expanse of Sylvanor, Elowen marvelled at the world below. From this height, the boundaries between elven territories and the wild lands blurred, revealing a tapestry of interconnected ecosystems. It was a stark reminder of the artificial nature of the divisions they had created. There, Noctis rumbled, banking towards a massive clearing in the forest. The gathering glade. If we are to rally allies, this is where we must begin. They descended into a natural amphitheatre, surrounded by towering trees whose branches intertwined to form a living canopy. As they landed, Elowen saw that they were not alone. Creatures of all kinds filled the glade. Griffins preened their feathers near a bubbling stream, while centaurs engaged in heated discussion with a group of talking bears. In the shadows, she caught glimpses of more elusive beings, unicorns, phoenixes, and even a pair of sphinxes observing the proceedings with enigmatic smiles. Elowen slid from Noctis's back, her legs trembling slightly from the long flight. All eyes turned to them, a hush falling over the assembled creatures. A majestic centaur with a coat the color of burnished copper stepped forward. "Noctis," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "you bring an elf to our sacred meeting place. Explain yourself." Noctis lowered his head in a gesture of respect. "Chiron, esteemed leader of the Windrunner herd, I present to you Elowen of House Moonwhisper. She is different from other elves. She seeks to restore the ancient balance." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Chiron's tail flicked nervously as he regarded Elowen. "Bold claims, young one. What proof can you offer of your intentions?" Elowen took a deep breath, centering herself. She reached out with her newfound abilities, not to control, but to connect. A gentle warmth radiated from her, and the assembled creatures felt a subtle shift in the air. "I come not as a conqueror or a tamer," Elowen declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the glade. "I come as a bridge between our worlds. Too long have we lived in fear and mistrust of one another, but a greater threat looms, one that would enslave us all." She recounted her encounter with Aldred and the warnings about Malach. As she spoke, she noticed a change in the atmosphere. The initial hostility gave way to curiosity, and then to growing concern. A phoenix, its feathers shimmering with ethereal fire, alighted on a nearby branch. "We have felt the dark influence of which you speak," it trilled. "Many of our kind have fallen under its sway, their minds clouded and their spirits broken." "And what would you have us do, Elf Queen?" growled one of the bears. "Trust in your kind again after centuries of persecution." Elowen met the bear's gaze steadily. "I ask not for blind trust, but for a chance to prove that cooperation is possible. Malach threatens all of us. United, we stand a chance against him. Divided, we will fall." Chiron stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Your words carry wisdom beyond your years, Elowen Moonwhisper, but words alone are not enough. If you truly seek alliance, you must prove your commitment." "Name your trial," Elowen said without hesitation. The centaur's eyes gleamed. "To the north lies the Cavern of Echoes. Within its depths dwells an ancient beast, driven mad by isolation and the dark whispers that plague our lands. If you can reach its heart and calm its fury, we will know your intentions are true." Noctis tensed beside her. "The behemoth of the cavern? Chiron, that's madness. None who have entered have ever returned." But Elowen placed a calming hand on the dragon's scales. "I accept your challenge, Chiron, but I will not go alone." She turned to the assembled creatures. "Who among you will stand with me? Who will take the first step towards a new era of trust between our peoples?" For a moment, silence reigned. Then, to everyone's surprise, one of the sphinxes padded forward. "I, Noctis, will accompany you," she purred. "Your quest intrigues me, and I would see its outcome with my own eyes." A young griffin followed, ruffling his feathers. "I'm in too, named Zephyr. Been itching for a real adventure." One by one, others stepped forward, a unicorn named Lunara, whose horn glowed with healing light. Grom, a battle-scarred minotaur wielding a massive warhammer, and Sylph, an air elemental who swirled around them in excited eddies. Elowen looked at her unlikely band of allies, feeling a swell of hope in her chest. "Thank you all," she said, bowing deeply. "Together, we will face this challenge and prove that the old boundaries need not define us." As they prepared to depart for the Cavern of Echoes, Chiron approached Elowen. "Be warned, young queen," he said softly. "The trial ahead will test more than your ability to calm beasts. It will probe the very depths of your soul. Are you prepared for what you might find there?" Elowen met his gaze, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her eyes. But she squared her shoulders and nodded. "I have to be, for the sake of all our peoples." With Noctis flying overhead and her new companions at her side, Elowen set out towards the looming mountains in the north. The Cavern of Echoes awaited, and with it a test that would determine the fate of Sylvanor. Little did they know that watchful eyes followed their every move, and dark forces were already setting plans in motion to ensure their failure. The journey to the Cavern of Echoes was fraught with challenges. They traversed treacherous mountain passes where icy winds threatened to pluck them from narrow ledges. Zephyr, the young griffin, proved invaluable here, using his wings to stabilize those in danger of falling. In the valleys below, they faced pockets of corrupted creatures, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light that spoke of Malach's influence. It was during one such encounter, as they fended off a pack of shadow-twisted wolves, that Elowen's powers truly began to manifest. As a wolf lunged for Grom's exposed flank, Elowen felt a surge of energy course through her. She reached out, not with her hand, but with her mind, and touched the creature's consciousness. The wolf froze mid-leap, its eyes clearing. For a moment, Elowen saw flashes of its life puppyhood, hunts, the warmth of pack and family. Then she felt the insidious tendrils of dark magic that had warped its mind. With a mental push that left her gasping, she severed those connections. The wolf collapsed, whimpering. When it rose, its eyes were clear, free of malevolent influence. It regarded Elowen for a long moment before turning and loping away, its pack following suit. By the ancient winds, Zephyr breathed, that was incredible. Nephthys, the Sphinx, studied Elowen with newfound respect. You didn't just control it, she observed. You freed it. Fascinating. Elowen leaned against a boulder, suddenly exhausted. I saw its true nature, she explained. The darkness was like a parasite, feeding on its fears and anger. I simply reminded it of who it really was. Grom helped her to her feet, his usually gruff demeanor softened by concern. Save your strength, little queen, he rumbled. The true test still lies ahead. As they neared the Cavern of Echoes, the landscape grew increasingly barren. Twisted, leafless trees clawed at the sky, and the ground was littered with bones of unfortunate creatures who had ventured too close to the behemoth's lair. Noctis landed beside them, folding his great wings. This is as far as I can go, he said. The cavern entrance is too narrow for me to follow. Be wary, Elowen. The behemoth is unlike any creature you've faced before. Elowen nodded, squaring her shoulders. Thank you, Noctis. Keep watch from above. If we're not back by nightfall. The dragon's golden eyes met hers. You will be, he said firmly. The entrance to the cavern yawned before them, a gaping maw in the mountainside. As they stepped into its shadows, the temperature plummeted. Lunara's horn provided a soft, silvery light that did little to dispel the oppressive darkness. They hadn't gone far when a low, rumbling growl echoed through the cavern. The very stone beneath their feet vibrated with its power. It knows we're here, Sylph whispered, her airy form shimmering with nervous energy. Elowen closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses. She recoiled almost immediately, overwhelmed by the waves of pain and fury emanating from deep within the mountain. So much suffering, she gasped. It's been alone for so long, trapped in darkness. They pressed on, deeper into the twisting passages. The growls grew louder, interspersed with roars that shook loose stones from the ceiling. Zephyr yelped as a stalactite nearly impaled him, saved only by Grom's quick reflexes. Finally, they emerged into a vast central chamber. Phosphorescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie blue glow over the scene. And there, in the center, stood the behemoth. It was a creature out of nightmare, a massive, bear-like body covered in scales as hard as steel. Multiple heads sprouted from its shoulders, each a different predator: wolf, lion, serpent, and others Elowen couldn't name. Its many eyes fixed upon the intruders, glowing with malevolent red light. Great Mother, Grom breathed, raising his warhammer. How can we possibly hope to calm that? But Elowen stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. Wait, she said, holding up a hand to stay her companions. Let me try to reach it. She took another step towards the behemoth, which let out a roar that nearly deafened them. Waves of anger and fear battered against her mind, threatening to overwhelm her. I hear you, Elowen called out, her voice steady despite her terror. I feel your pain. You've been alone for so long, haven't you? Feared and hunted, never understood. The behemoth's wolf head snarled, but the lion head cocked to one side, a flicker of curiosity in its eyes. Elowen took another step. I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help, to understand. She reached out, not with her hand, but with her mind, offering connection instead of control. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a mental force that felt like a tidal wave, the behemoth's consciousness crashed into hers. Elowen staggered, nearly falling to her knees. Visions flashed before her eyes, centuries of solitude, the agony of transformation as dark magic warped its form, the fear and revulsion of those who stumbled upon its lair. Beneath it all, a longing for connection so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "You're not alone anymore," Elowen whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Let me show you." With every ounce of strength she possessed, Elowen opened herself fully to the connection. She shared her own experiences, her hopes for unity between all living creatures, the warmth of friendship and love. Slowly, achingly, she felt a change come over the behemoth. The red glow faded from its eyes, replaced by confusion, then wonder. Its massive form began to shift and change. Elowen's companions watched in awe as the behemoth's extra heads melted away, its body shrinking and reforming. When the transformation was complete, a single, majestic creature stood before them, part bear, part lion, its fur shimmering with an otherworldly light. "I remember," it said, its voice a deep rumble that somehow conveyed both great age and childlike wonder. "I am Ursa, guardian of these mountains. What happened to me?" Elowen smiled through her tears, reaching out to touch Ursa's soft fur. "A great darkness tried to twist you, old one, but your true self was stronger. Welcome back." As Ursa nuzzled against her hand, Elowen felt a surge of triumph. They had passed the test. More than that, they had freed an ancient being from centuries of torment. But even as hope bloomed in her heart, a chill ran down her spine. Somewhere in the shadows of her mind, she felt a flicker of malevolent awareness. Malach knew what had transpired here, and he would not let this victory go unchallenged. The real battle, Elowen realized, was only just beginning. The journey back to the gathering glade was a mix of triumph and trepidation. Ursa, now restored to his true form, padded alongside them, his presence both comforting and awe-inspiring. The ancient guardian's knowledge of the mountain paths proved invaluable, guiding them safely through treacherous terrain. As they emerged from the foothills, Noctis swooped down to meet them, his golden eyes widening at the sight of Ursa. "By the elder scales," the dragon breathed, "you actually did it." Elowen smiled wearily, the strain of the past few days etched on her face. "We did it together," she said, glancing at her diverse group of companions. Each played a crucial role. They arrived at the gathering glade to find it buzzing with anticipation. Word of their quest had spread, and representatives from even more magical species had congregated to witness the outcome. Chiron stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disbelief and respect as he beheld Ursa. "Elowen of House Moonwhisper," the centaur intoned, his voice carrying across the glade. "You have done what many thought impossible. You have not only calmed the behemoth, but restored one of the ancient guardians to his true form. The wild kindred acknowledge your commitment and your power." A cheer went up from the assembled creatures, but Elowen raised a hand for silence. "Thank you, Chiron, but our work is far from done. Even now, I sense Malach's influence growing. We must act quickly if we hope to save both our realms." She turned to address the gathered beings, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "For too long, we have lived apart, viewing each other with suspicion and fear. But the threat we face knows no boundaries. Malach seeks to enslave us all, elves and magical creatures alike. Only by standing together do we have a chance of stopping him." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Grom stepped forward, his massive form imposing even among the diverse gathering. "The Elf Queen speaks true," he rumbled. "I've seen her power firsthand. She seeks not to control, but to understand, to heal." Others from their group voiced their support, Zephyr's enthusiastic squawks, Nephthys' measured wisdom, Lunara's gentle encouragement. Even Sylph, usually flighty and capricious, swirled around Elowen in a protective eddy. Ursa's deep voice silenced all others. "For centuries I was lost in darkness and pain," he said, his eyes focusing on some distant memory. "Elowen brought me back to myself. If she believes our realms can be united, then she has my support and the support of the mountains I guard. Chiron nodded solemnly. Very well. The wild kindred will stand with you, Elowen Moonwhisper. What is your plan to confront Malach? Elowen was about to respond when a searing pain lanced through her mind. She staggered, caught by Noctis's quick movement. Visions flashed before her eyes, Sylvanor in flames, magical creatures rampaging through the streets, a dark crystal pulsing with malevolent energy. He's making his move, she gasped, fighting through the pain. Malach, he's attacking the Elven capital. Chaos erupted in the glade. Creatures argued about whether to help the elves, old grudges resurfaces in heated debates. But Elowen's voice cut through the din. This is exactly what Malach wants, she shouted. Division, mistrust, these are his weapons as much as the corrupted beasts. We must stand together or all is lost. She turned to Noctis. Can you get me to Sylvanor quickly? The dragon lowered his head in affirmation. Climb on. We'll outpace the wind itself. I'm coming too, Zephyr announced, puffing out his feathers. One by one, others volunteered: Grom, Lunara, Nephthys, Sylph. Even Ursa rumbled his determination to help. Chiron approached Elowen as she prepared to mount Noctis. Take this, he said, pressing an amulet into her hand. Its surface shimmered with ancient runes. It will allow you to call upon the strength of the wild kindred in your time of need. Use it wisely. Elowen clasped the amulet around her neck, feeling its power thrum in resonance with her own. Thank you, Chiron. Guard the glade, if we fail. The centaur's eyes hardened. You will not fail. Go, young queen. Fulfill your destiny. As Noctis launched into the sky, Elowen looked back at the assembled magical creatures. Many were preparing for battle, setting aside centuries of mistrust to face a common enemy. Her heart swelled with hope and determination. They soared towards Sylvanor, the wind whipping past them. Elowen's mind raced, formulating plans and contingencies. She knew that the coming battle would test her newfound abilities to their limit. But as she felt the steady beat of Noctis's wings beneath her and sensed the unwavering support of her companions, she allowed herself a small smile. United, they had a chance. United, they could bring balance back to their world. The spires of the Elven capital appeared on the horizon, wreathed in ominous storm clouds. Elowen tightened her grip on Noctis's scales, her voice barely audible over the wind. Hold on, my people. We're coming. As they descended towards the chaos below, Elowen steeled herself for the confrontation to come. Malach awaited, and with him the fate of two realms hung in the balance. Sylvanor was a city under siege. As Noctis swooped low over the Elven capital, Elowen's heart clenched at the sight of destruction below. Corrupted magical beasts rampaged through the streets, their eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. Elven warriors fought valiantly, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer number and ferocity of their opponents. There, Elowen pointed towards the silver palace at the city's heart. A swirling vortex of dark energy pulsed above its highest tower. That's where we'll find Malach. Noctis banked sharply, avoiding a blast of corrupted magic from a twisted chimera below. Hold tight, he growled. This landing won't be gentle. They touched down in the palace courtyard, scattering panicked elves and snarling beasts alike. Elowen leapt from Noctis's back, her companions quickly forming a defensive circle around her. Elowen, a familiar voice called out. Thaler pushed through the chaos, his armor dented and bloodied. Thank the ancient trees you've returned. But what manner of creatures are these with you? Allies, Elowen said firmly. Where is the Verdant Council? Thaler's face darkened. Trapped in the Grand Hall, a barrier of dark magic prevents us from reaching them. And Malach. He pointed towards the tower. He ascended there shortly after the attack began. Elowen nodded, her mind racing. Grom, Zephyr, Sylph help defend the city. Free as many corrupted beasts as you can. Lunara, your healing will be needed here. Nephthys, Noctis, Ursa, you're with me. We're going after Malach. As her companions dispersed to their tasks, Elowen turned to Thaler. Old friend, I need you to spread the word. The magical creatures fighting alongside us are allies. We must stand together if we hope to survive this day. Thaler's eyes widened as he took in Noctis's imposing form and Ursa's ancient majesty. He nodded slowly. I understand. Be careful, my queen. Malach's power has grown beyond anything we've seen. Elowen managed a grim smile. So has mine. They fought their way through the palace, Noctis's fire and Ursa's raw strength clearing a path. Nephthys proved invaluable, her sphinx riddles confounding the corrupted beasts long enough for Elowen to break Malach's hold on them. As they ascended the tower stairs, the air grew thick with dark magic. Elowen felt it pressing against her mind, whispering promises of power and control. She clutched Chiron's amulet, drawing strength from its warm pulse. They burst onto the tower's summit to find Malach standing before a swirling portal of darkness. The once proud druid was barely recognizable, his form twisted by the very magics he sought to control. In his hand he clutched a crystal that pulsed with sickly light. "Ah, the fabled beast tamer arrives," Malach sneered, his voice distorted and inhuman. "Come to see your kingdom fall." Elowen stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. "It's over, Malach. Surrender the crystal and end this madness." Malach laughed, the sound sending chills down her spine. "Madness? I've brought order to chaos. These beasts were meant to be ruled, to serve a greater purpose." "You've enslaved them," Elowen countered, "twisted their true natures. This isn't balance, it's tyranny." "Foolish child," Malach snarled. "You know nothing of true power." He raised the crystal, and a wave of dark energy pulsed outward. Elowen felt the attack batter against her mental defenses. Behind her, Noctis roared in pain, and Ursa let out a bellow of rage. But Nephthys stepped forward, her eyes glowing with ancient power. "Your riddles of dominance have no power here, Dark One," the Sphinx intoned. "For every puzzle has its solution, and your corruption is no exception." Taking advantage of Nephtys's distraction, Elowen reached out with her power. She touched the minds of the beasts throughout the city, not seeking to control, but to awaken, to remind them of their true selves. A psychic shockwave rippled outward. Across Sylvanor, corrupted creatures stumbled, their eyes clearing. The tide of battle began to turn. Malach howled in fury. "No, I will not be denied." He plunged the crystal into his own chest, dark energy coruscating around him. His form began to warp and grow, taking on aspects of dozens of magical beasts. Elowen steeled herself, drawing upon every ounce of her newfound power. She felt the strength of her allies flowing through her Noctis's ancient wisdom, Ursa's unwavering guardianship, Nephtys's enigmatic insight. The amulet at her throat blazed with the combined might of the wild kindred. "You seek to rule through fear and domination," Elowen declared, her voice ringing with authority. "But true strength comes from understanding, from harmony between all living things." She reached out, not to fight Malach's twisted form, but to connect with the fractured souls trapped within. Human and beast alike, she touched each corrupted essence with compassion and unwavering resolve. Malach's monstrous shape writhed, fighting against her influence. But slowly, inexorably, the dark energies began to dissipate. The crystal in his chest pulsed erratically, its power waning. With a final, desperate cry, Malach lunged for Elowen. But Noctis was there, interposing his massive bulk. Ursa's paw swept out, catching the falling druid and pinning him to the ground. The crystal fell from Malach's chest, its light guttering. Elowen approached cautiously, aware of the immense power still contained within. "It's over," she said softly, looking down at Malach's now human form. "Let go of your hatred. Help us rebuild." Malach's eyes, clear for the first time in years, filled with tears. "What have I done?" he whispered. As the sun broke through the dissipating storm clouds, Elowen lifted the crystal. With a pulse of pure, untainted magic, she shattered it into harmless dust. A new day was dawning for Sylvanor, one of unity, understanding, and hope. The road ahead would not be easy, but as Elowen looked out over her city elves and magical creatures working together to heal and rebuild, she knew that anything was possible. The time of the Beast Tamer had begun. In the days that followed Malach's defeat, Sylvanor underwent a transformation unlike any in its long history. The streets that had once echoed with the sounds of battle now buzzed with the excited chatter of elves and magical creatures working side by side to rebuild. Elowen stood on the balcony of the Silver Palace, watching as a group of centaurs helped raise a fallen tower, their strength perfectly complementing the elves' architectural expertise. Nearby, a flock of phoenixes used their regenerative fire to heal a scorched grove of ancient trees. The sight filled her heart with hope. "Your Majesty," Thaler's voice came from behind her. "The Verdant Council awaits you in the Grand Hall. It's time." Elowen nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Today marked her official coronation as Queen of Sylvanor, but it would be unlike any in the kingdom's history. As she entered the Grand Hall, Elowen was struck by the diversity of the gathering. Elven nobles stood alongside representatives from every magical species that had aided in Malach's defeat. Noctis lounged near the back, his massive form barely fitting through the grand doors. Ursa sat on his haunches, looking somewhat out of place, but no less regal. Nephthys, Zephyr, Grom, Lunara, and Sylph were all present, honored guests in a ceremony they had helped make possible. Lysandra, the eldest of the Verdant Council, stepped forward. Her ancient eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she spoke. "Elowen of House Moonwhisper, you have proven yourself not just as a leader of elves, but as a unifier of realms. Your courage, compassion, and wisdom have ushered in a new era for Sylvanor. Are you prepared to take up the mantle of rulership, to guide both elves and magical beings into this new future?" Elowen's voice rang clear and strong. "I am." "Then kneel," Lysandra instructed. As Elowen lowered herself to one knee, she felt a shift in the air. Lysandra placed the traditional crown of Sylvanor upon her head, a delicate circlet of mithril and living vines. But then, to Elowen's surprise, others stepped forward. Chiron approached, bearing a wreath of shimmering leaves. "From the wild kindred," he said, placing it atop the elven crown. "A symbol of the harmony between our peoples." Noctis leaned forward, gently depositing a scale that gleamed like polished gold. "From the sky dwellers," the dragon rumbled, "may your wisdom soar to great heights." One by one, representatives from each magical species came forward, adding their own tokens to Elowen's crown. When it was done, she wore a diadem unlike any other, a physical representation of the unity she had forged. Lysandra smiled, her voice filled with emotion. "Rise, Elowen Moonwhisper, Queen of Sylvanor and Protector of the Wild Realms. May your reign bring lasting peace and understanding to all." As Elowen stood, the hall erupted in cheers. Elves and magical creatures alike raised their voices in celebration. It was a moment of pure joy, of hope for a brighter future. But even as she basked in the warmth of the moment, Elowen felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. There was still much work to be done. In the weeks that followed, Elowen implemented sweeping changes. The borders between Sylvanor and the wild lands were redefined, with areas of shared governance established. The Verdant Council was expanded to include representatives from the magical races, ensuring all voices were heard in matters of rulership. Malach, stripped of his powers but offered a chance at redemption, dedicated himself to undoing the damage he had caused. Under close supervision, he worked tirelessly to heal the land and the creatures he had corrupted. Elowen's companions found new roles in this changing world. Noctis became an ambassador between dragons and ground dwellers. Ursa returned to his mountains, but now as a welcome guardian rather than a feared monster. Nephthys established a school of riddles and wisdom, open to all who sought to expand their minds. Yet challenges remained. Not all elves were quick to accept these changes, and some magical creatures still harbored resentment from centuries of conflict. Elowen knew that true unity would take time, patience, and unwavering dedication. One evening, as the sun set over a Sylvanor both familiar and wonderfully new, Elowen stood in the gathering glade. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her abilities. She felt the pulse of life all around her, the ancient trees, the magical creatures, the elves in their shimmering cities. All connected, all part of a greater whole. A soft voice spoke from beside her. "You've done well, young queen." Elowen opened her eyes to see Aldred, the ancient druid, standing there. His form was translucent, more spirit now than physical being. "There is still so much to do," Elowen said softly. Aldred smiled. "There always will be, but you have laid the foundation for a future brighter than any could have imagined. Remember, true strength lies not in control, but in understanding, in the bonds forged between all living things." As the old druid's form faded away, Elowen felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead would not be easy, but with compassion, wisdom, and the united strength of two realms, anything was possible. The time of the Beast Tamer had only just begun, and its story was far from over.